So hello dear students, welcome to Baji Rao IAS Academy, previous year's questions analysis, right? So as part of the previous year question papers analysis, we have been discussing UPSC previous year question papers, okay? So today we will discuss about India-Africa relations, India-Egypt relations, okay? So broadly India-Africa relations and why Africa is so important for India. Now, apart from Africa, in recent times, the strategic importance of Egypt has also been increasing at a rapid pace. So, in this context, we will understand what exactly India's engagement with Africa and Egypt. Okay, so the question here it is asking about India's outreach to African countries is going to augur well for India's foreign policy, right? So in this context, discuss it in the context of Egyptian President India visit 2023 January. So he is Egyptian President Al-Sisi, okay? So Abdel Fattah Al-Sisi, right? So he was the chief guest of the Republic Day event, okay? So he was the chief guest and he was the first president from Egypt to attend such a summit or such an event, okay? So therefore in this context we need to understand what is the India's why India has been giving much more preference to Egypt in recent times, and what is the significance of Egypt for India. Now, so Egyptian president, the president of Arab Republic of Egypt. Okay, so Arab Republic of Egypt, Abdel Fattah Al-Sisi was the chief guest of India's 74th Republic Day. So he was the chief guest of India's 74th Republic Day. Okay, so he was the first such president from Egypt to attend such an event in India. Now, on the right, you can see the location of Egypt. Okay, so east there's a Red Sea and the Suez Canal, which linking Red Sea with the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, on the left, Libya, Sudan, so and other important countries. Okay, so this is the location of Egypt. Now, after that, the question has also broadly asked about India's engagement with Africa. Okay, so in Africa's relevance and Africa's importance has also been growing at a rapid pace, right? So in this context, we need to understand Africa is accounting for around 17% of the global population. So we also know that India accounts for 18% of the global population. On the other hand, Africa accounts for 17% of the global population. So in fact, African population projected to increase 25% by 2050. So therefore, such a massive increase in population in Africa, and with common challenges, both India and Africa have a common challenges in terms of high levels of poverty, unemployment, gender inequalities, lack of infrastructure, poor healthcare, education, corruption, political instability, and also terrorism. These are common challenges both India and Africa have been facing. Now, these common challenges also providing opportunities for India's increased engagement with Africa. So, opportunities in the sense that India could be a developmental partner for Africa. So, India along with Japan, they have launched Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. You might have heard about this Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. The focus of the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor is to develop infrastructure in African continent and reduce growing Chinese influence in the region. Now, if you look at the African continent, Chinese influence is much more than India's influence. because China has been investing heavily in Africa, and apart from investment, it also significantly improved its presence, whether security partnerships, defense cooperation, trade, commerce, right? So therefore, China's presence is much more dominant in Africa compared to India. However, over a period of time, Africa's importance will increase. So in this context, please, whenever you refer Africa in the map, so please go through all the countries. So what are the coastal countries and what are the landlocked countries, and what are the rivers which are actually flowing through African continent? Because at least one question is being asked from the African continent, at least in every UPSC prelims examination, whether they ask about rivers, whether they can also ask about different lakes which are located, and physical features, for example, the deserts and Drakensberg mountains and other physical features. So therefore, you have to be very careful. So go through all the physical features and also go through the political map of Africa, because at least one question you can attempt if you are thorough with the African map. Now, in this context, we need to understand the significance of Africa for India. So, what exactly the significance of Africa for India? Now, first and foremost, we need to understand, similar to India, Africa is one of the fastest growing countries. Okay, so one of the fastest growing continent, or it is a home to the fastest growing countries. For example, if you take Rwanda, Senegal, and Tanzania, so they are one of the fastest growing economies. So therefore, India, in increasing its engagement with African countries such as Tanzania, Senegal, and Rwanda, would provide much more greater opportunities for India. Okay, so therefore, India could be able to realize its potential through developmental cooperation and trade, commerce with these countries, right? So therefore, it provides huge employment opportunities for the people of Africa. So in fact, if you look at India's overall ties with Africa, India generally focuses on capacity building of people in Africa. So because of the capacity building efforts of India, there's an enormous goodwill for India in African continent. So if this goodwill is rightly leveraged, then India could be one of the dominant countries in the African continent. So secondly, African continent, as I've already told you, that it is home to around 17% of the global population, and it expected to become 25% of the global population by the year 2050. So therefore, with such a huge population, this could be a market, okay, a potential market for India. Now, India exploring markets is also very important. Now, India focused on schemes like Make in India program, Atmanirbhar Bharat program, supply chain resilience networks. So all these programs have been emphasized on domestic manufacturing and reducing our reliance or dependence on imports from other countries. So therefore, when we are manufacturing domestically, we should also look for the markets outside. Now, if you listen to the yesterday's lecture, in that lecture, I have already told you that India is out of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. This is a kind of a free trade agreement between 10 Asian countries plus 5 countries in the region. Okay, so India is now not part of the RCEP network. Since India is out of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, now India is looking towards European Union and US, UK. Okay, so not just these Western developed countries, but also Africa. Okay, so Africa also has a huge potential market for India. So therefore, since India has an advantage, India have the advantage over these countries. The potential markets would offer a best destination for Indian goods. So therefore, with 17% of the global population, and both India and Africa, the combined market value or the combined economic value is, only uh, African continent GDP is 2.5 trillion. So what is India's uh, you know uh, economic value, market value? So it is around 3.2 trillion US dollars. Okay, so this is India's GDP. However, when we look at Africa GDP, it is around 2.5 trillion dollars. So therefore, the population and the market value would offer India a huge potential. Okay, it could be a huge potential market for India. And after that, if you look at resources, so Africa is endowed with rich resources. For example, when we talk about rare earth metals, diamonds, gold, and even oil. Okay, so crude oil, gas. So in all those respects, Africa has been endowed with rich resources, rich natural resources. So it is dominated with crude oil, gas, and in fact, when you look at pulses, now no doubt that India is the largest producer of pulses in the world. So even though it is the largest producer of the pulses, due to 18% of the global population, it has to meet in order to meet the demand, the domestic demand of the pulses, India has to import pulses from several African countries such as Tanzania. So India regularly import pulses from countries like Tanzania and Mozambique. So therefore, they produce huge quantities of pulses, lentils, which India imports, and they are also a source of leather, gold, and other metals. So India has been exploring these resources in other parts of the world also. For example, in order to make lithium ion batteries, we require cobalt. So in a similar sense, we also require rare earth metals. Since we have predominantly dependent on China, so that could impact India's overall interest. So now India has been focusing on supply chain resilience. So as part of the supply chain resilience, now India has been looking towards diversifying supply chain. Diversifying supply chain. So diversification of supply chains will help in absorbing the impacts, help in absorbing the shocks like pandemic. And due to the geopolitics, at any time, China could impose restrictions on export of rare earth metals to other countries. So therefore, in this context, diversification of supply chain is very important for India. And now India is looking towards Africa as part of the supply chain resilience. Now, if we talk about examples of these metals, Namibia and Niger, so they are the top 10 global producers of uranium. Now, whenever the question is being asked about uranium resources or uranium reserves across the world, you draw a map, and in the map, you just represent uranium reserves in Namibia and Niger. So we all know that uranium reserves are located in Australia and Central Asia, such as Kazakhstan. So in this context, when you represent Namibia and Niger in the map, whenever the question is being asked, so it adds value to your answer. Now after that, South Africa is the world's largest producer of platinum and chromium. Platinum and chromium are very important, valuable metals. So therefore, South Africa is the world's largest producer of platinum and chromium. So not just these metals, Africa is also a potential source of agriculture resources or agriculture commodities. So agriculture, the cooperation between India and Africa extends to agriculture, trade, commerce, culture, people to people contact. People to people contact. Now, if you look at African people, so they are coming to India for education and medical tourism, especially. This is a very important field, medical tourism, and even for employment opportunities. Because they have commonalities, because both the countries have commonalities, and they have a shared history, shared civilization. So that is the essence of flourishing ties between India and Africa. Now after that, we need to discuss about India-Africa relations in a detailed way. Okay, so if you look at a diagram which is given here, so if you look at this, information which is on your right side, India and Africa have a combined population of 2.3 billion. So this is true that around 2.3 billion people are from these two countries alone. Now global population reached to 800 crore, okay, or 8 billion. So out of 8 billion population, just 2.3 billion population are from India and Africa alone. So in this context, you can imagine the importance of these countries at the global level. So apart from that, around 3 million diaspora population have been living in Africa. Okay, so Indian diaspora in Africa consists of 3 million population. Now if you look at Indian diaspora population in Middle East, it accounts for around 8 to 9 million. However, when you look at India's diaspora population, it is 3 million in Africa, right? So after that, there's around 50,000 strong ethnic African diaspora in India. Okay, so they are a descended people. So they are originally from Africa and now they are living in India. Okay, around 50,000 African people. So apart from that, if you talk about the bilateral trade between India and Africa, it amounts to around 70 billion US dollars. Okay, so this is the total bilateral trade between India and Africa. So after that, if you look at the growth of or the momentum of the trade has increased over 20 times in last 15 years and it has a potential to grow further because India's enormous goodwill in Africa and India's competition with China has enabling India to become more proactive, and it has been emphasizing on delivery of developmental projects on time. So earlier, India used to face the problem in delivery of developmental projects at an early stage. So however, due to competition with China and India's proactive stance over its engagement with Africa, the trade has increased 20 times in last 15 years and it is expected to grow going ahead. After that, if we talk about India's peacekeeping mission in Africa, now majority of the India's peacekeepers served in African continent. So this is the one reason for developing goodwill among the people of Africa towards India. So around 4,500 Indian soldiers are on ground in Africa under various peacekeeping missions. So still 4,500 Indian peacekeeping forces are in African continent. So apart from that, a fully formed Indian female police unit is also present in Liberia. See, this fully formed Indian female police unit is part of Indian contingent of United Nations peacekeeping force. Okay, so India already have a fully formed Indian female contingent. So apart from that, India owned or Indian owned operated companies are second largest employers in Nigeria. So Nigeria located somewhere here. So in Nigeria, Indian companies are second largest employers. So you can imagine India's ties with Nigeria. So recently, India has also promised, a huge investment in Nigeria because Nigeria hosts enormous amount of oil reserves. So since India is looking to ensure energy security and it also diversifying its energy basket, Nigeria is strategically important for India to ensure energy security. Now, apart from that, India offers each year around 900 scholarships to African students. Now, issuing scholarships to African students on regular basis is very important because so it further strengthens goodwill, people to people contacts, and it ensures that African students come to India. So that is the essence of regular people to people contacts. Now after that, we should also discuss about the total population. Around 3% of the South African population are Indian origin. So therefore, the diaspora community also plays a very important role in strengthening bilateral ties. Now, if you look at India's total investment in Africa, it is around 7.5 billion US dollars. So India is currently spending 7.5 billion of infrastructure projects around 40 countries in African continent. However, if you look at China, China has been spending double the amount of what India has been spending. So China has been spending around 15 billion US dollars on infrastructure in African continent. So therefore, China has been emerging as a rival for India in its engagement with African continent. So therefore, in this respect, there is a need for India to further strengthen its investment, trade, people-to-people contacts, and capacity building efforts in African continent. Now, if we look at this in a detailed way, so as part of India-African relations, so if you look at the economic relations, the bilateral trade between India and Africa touched to 98 billion US dollars in the financial year 22-23. So, as we have already discussed that the trade has been increased 20 times in last 15 years and it is expected to grow further. So therefore, such a massive increase in bilateral trade is a positive economic development of India's overall growing engagement with Africa. So after that, India has also been earning enormous goodwill because of its investments in infrastructure development and also social sectors such as education and healthcare. Now, if you look at Africa, Africa is considered as one of the backward continents in terms of infrastructure. So it lacks infrastructure. So however, India launched Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. So this technical India Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, so particularly aimed at strengthening infrastructure in social sector such as education, healthcare, and information technology. So as part of India Technical and Economic Cooperation (ITEC), Africa is one of the biggest beneficiaries of this ITEC program. So please remember this ITEC program. So after that, we need to look at the challenges. So what are the challenges in India's engagement with African continent? So as I've already told you, one of the major challenge is India's limited capacity with respect to the infrastructure development. This is the one of the major challenge for India. So therefore, India's economic might, military might has been increasing over a period of time. So this has to be used to further enhance its influence and presence in African continent. So secondly, if we look at the African continent, the problem is we have been facing the main problem we have been facing is delivering the developmental projects on time. So very often we are not able to deliver the developmental projects on time in African continent. So that has been resulting in trust deficit between India and these countries. So therefore, the focus should be on delivering these developmental projects on time. So that would generate enormous trust and confidence among the African people towards India. Now we all know that the other major challenge India has been facing in African continent is China. So China is a most China has India has been facing challenge from China. So because China has been investing more, if you look at the bilateral trade of China with Africa, it is more than India, what India has been doing. However, India with the cooperation from other like-minded countries like Japan, trying to enhance its presence, reduce Chinese presence in the African continent. So apart from this, the other challenges in African continent include insurgency, ethnic violence, terrorism. So terrorism is one of the major problem in the African continent. So since India is a major advocate of terrorism, so these are the common areas where India and Africa can work together. Okay, so if you look at these problems, terrorism, insurgency, ethnic violence, and other challenges, political instability. So we have seen those challenges in Ethiopia, Sudan, and Central African countries. So apart from that, so different countries have been participating in the African continent, because African continent have become one of the most important region. If you look at China, Russia, UAE, United States, European Union, Japan, Turkey, UAE, so they are actively competing to strengthen their relations with all other African countries. So however, one thing we need to understand, recently African Union was invited to the G20 summit. So on the initiative of India, African Union has become a 21st member of the G20 grouping. So this further strengthens India's relationship with Africa. Okay, so India traditionally, claimed that it is a leader of global South, leader of global South. So recent India's move upholds India's claim that it is a leader of global South. Now, in this context, we need to understand India-Egypt relationship. So, what is the nature of India-Egypt relationship? So, as I have already told you that recently, Egypt President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi uh, became the chief guest of Republic Day event. Okay, so that is the 74th Republic Day event. So, both India and in this particular visit, both India and Egypt have agreed to elevate their bilateral relationship to a strategic relationship. So, in international relations, we very often come across the word strategic relationship. So, what is this strategic relationship? Now, this strategic relationship is a long-term partnership between two or more countries. So, however, the strategic partnership is based on two important crucial elements. So, what are those elements? So, they include security, defense, political, and economic ties. Okay, so apart from that, the technological collaboration between countries, people to people contacts, and cultural linkages. Okay, so they leverage all these things to further strengthen the bilateral relationship. So this is the meaning of strategic partnership. So India has been enjoying strategic partnership with several other countries. Okay, so even with the major centers of the power, all the major centers of the power, India has been engaging in a strategic relationship. Okay, so therefore, in recent visit, India-Egypt partnership has been elevated to a level of strategic partnership. However, India and Egypt have expressed a common concern for terrorism. So no doubt that for India, terrorism is a common concern. Similarly, since Egypt is located between African continent and Middle East, for Egypt also terrorism is a major concern. So therefore, both these countries, India and Egypt, have agreed to take a concerted action towards counter terrorism and particularly cross-border terrorism. Now, if you look at India, cross-border terrorism is a major problem for India. So this has been emanating from Pakistan, our western neighbor. So whenever these countries talk about the cross-border terrorism, for India it is Pakistan, and for countries like Egypt it is from other countries in their region. So apart from that, India and Egypt, they are seeking investment in infrastructure. So Egypt want that India should invest more and more in infrastructure development in their country. Okay, so they wanted to develop the metro project. So they wanted to develop the alternate canal to Suez. So therefore, they wanted that India should invest in metro projects and Suez Canal economic zone. So if India invests more and more in Egypt, so this could easily outweigh China. So India's presence in Egypt is very significant for India's growing influence in the Middle East. Because if you look at Egypt, this is a very important geostrategic location. Okay, so around 12% of the global trade passes through the Suez Canal alone. So for energy security also, Egypt is very, very important. So in this context, if India wanted to establish a permanent location, India wanted to have a permanent presence and greater influence when compared to all other major powers. Egypt is a right location for India. So please remember, China already had a military base, right? So China already had a military base in this region. So therefore, in order to counter Chinese presence also, India's greater engagement with Egypt is very important. Now, so no doubt that Egypt had occupied the geostrategic location. So this can be considered as a geostrategic location of Egypt because it has been connecting two continents firstly, and secondly it is also holding the geostrategic location because of the trade routes. 12% of the global trade passes through the Suez Canal. Okay, so because of these reasons, Egypt can be considered as a key player. Now, apart from that, both India and Egypt have a common challenges, whether terrorism, unemployment, and corruption, uh, so insurgency, all other challenges. So since they have a common challenges, so these challenges have been bringing these two countries together. Now, apart from that, major market for India. So Egypt could become a major market for India, and in fact, Egypt can be a gateway for Middle East, Europe, and Africa. So it is because of its geostrategic location, it could be a gateway for India's access to Africa and also Europe. So alternatively, Egypt can also become a potential market for India. So because of all these reasons, Egypt is very crucial and important for India. When you write a conclusion for this answer, India have been facing certain challenges. Okay, so challenges I have already discussed. So in conclusion, what you need to write, so you have to give some suggestions to overcome those challenges. So in this way, you can conclude this answer and overall emphasize on India's greater presence in the Middle East and also African continent, because now India wanted to shoulder the greater responsibilities. India wanted to become a global superpower. So therefore, it should be started with India's extended neighborhood. So this is how you can conclude this answer. So the next question is about India-US relations. So India-US ties. Now, the question has been asking that evaluate India-US relationship in the context of changing global order. So, particularly after post-Cold War, there is a significant tilt of India towards US. So earlier, India maintained the policy of non-aligned movement. So non-alignment movement, according to non-aligned movement, so India will not join either USSR or US. So it will be independent, and the policies of India are guided by the strategic autonomy. However, after Cold War, there is a significant shift in India's foreign policy that favors US because it wanted to diversify its economy. It requires investments and it no longer dependent on USSR because that become disintegrated and that becomes a weak power. So therefore, US cooperation is very, very important for India. So because of this reason, India had started tilting towards USA. So post 2014, after this NDA government came to power, so there's a significant shift in India's foreign policy. Now India had been engaging at a greater level with US, particularly in the backdrop of Indo-Pacific geopolitical construct that has been developing on in the India's backward. So India's backwaters. So that is in the Indian Ocean. So therefore, we need to understand what exactly changing global order signifies. So what is changing global order? So we very often hear that changing global order. So what is this changing global order? So right. So earlier, the global order is dominated by these G7 countries. So earlier, even the global order is known as unipolar world order. Unipolar world order, because the world order is dominated by G7 countries in general and US in particular. However, if you look at the current global order, there's a rise of China that has been challenging US hegemony. Now, apart from the rise of China, there's also a rise of middle powers like BRICS nations. Rise of middle powers, and in fact, countries in Middle East, they are also moving away from US and adopting the policy of strategic autonomy. So this has been symbolizing decline of US influence and hegemony. US hegemony and influence. So therefore, the world is moving from unipolar world order to multipolar world order. So what does it mean? That so only one single power or one single nation has the hegemony. Okay, so the entire global order is the entire global order is surrounded around one particular country, that is US. However, when we talk about multipolar world order, there are multiple centers of power. For example, BRICS and several middle powers like Australia, Japan. Okay, so there's a changing global order. So that has been described here. So the Western leadership of the world. So G7 is considered as the Western developed leadership. Western leadership. So the Western leadership of the world seems to be in decline. So in recent times, the Western influence has been declining. So particularly, the US political and military hegemony is being challenged by rising powers like China. So no doubt now China is standing up to US. China has been challenging US hegemony. Okay, so the Western leadership is not just challenged by China but also other emerging powers. Okay, so since other emerging powers have been challenging the existing unipolar world order that is centered around US, so it has been moving towards a more of a multipolar world order. Okay, so this is what is called as a changing world order. So I hope you understood what does changing world order means. Okay, now world has been moving from unipolar world order to multipolar. So at the same time, post globalization, 1990s, post globalization, there has been a clear growth of non-state organizations. These non-state organizations have been playing visibly a greater role. For example, we talk about multinational corporations, NGOs, civil society organizations, and even terrorist organizations. So these non-state actors have playing visibly greater role. Okay, so therefore, in the changing world order, the space for non-state actors has also significantly increased. Okay, so now they have a very different forms and different capacities. So this is what broadly called as changing world order. So this is what is changing world order means. Now, if you look at India-US relationship in the changing world order, so what exactly bringing India-US together? We need to understand this. So what exactly bringing India-US together? So the confluence of common factors. The common factors between India and US, like democratic values. Okay, so what are the democratic values? So respect for rule of law, justice, liberty, equality. So these are democratic values. So respecting the international law, rule of law. So all those factors are democratic values. Now you take this into perspective that now India is the largest democracy in the world. India is the largest democracy in the world. So, however, if you look at US is the oldest democracy. So, this is also considered as the confluence of two democracies, right? So, both these countries have democratic values and they also have a shared areas of interest and they stand against terrorism, and these factors make India and US enjoy comprehensive strategic partnership. Now, in recent times, China emerged as a common threat for both US and India. So, this is another area where the confluence has been, taking place between India and US. So, in this context, if you take the relationship between India and US into perspective, when we talk about the data, so the bilateral trade between India and US is 128 billion US dollars. So the other significant aspect you have to remember here is that other significant aspect here is that USA surpassed China as India's largest trading partner. Now, USA is India's largest trading partner. So, however, here the beauty of India-US relationship is that India has been enjoying surplus trade balance, surplus trade balance with US. Okay, so what does it mean when India has been enjoying surplus trade balance? So this means that India exporting more to US than what it is importing from US. Okay, so more exports and less imports. So however, on the other hand, India China bilateral trade is around 111 billion US dollars. But India had a huge negative balance of trade with China. So India importing more from China rather than exporting. But this is a very huge negative trade, surplus. So therefore, India has been focusing on reducing the gap. Okay, reducing the trade deficit with China. So on the other hand, so largest export destination. So USA has emerged as the largest export destination for Indian goods. So after that, after Russia, Israel, USA is the third largest defense supplier for India. So because around 11 percentage of total arms is being imported from USA. So if you look at C-17 Globemasters, Apache attack helicopters, right? Chinooks. So we have importing from USA, right? Therefore, USA is the third largest defense supplier for India and contributing to around 11 percentage of India's total defense imports. Okay. So after that, the overall India maintains the trade surplus. As I've already told you that when we talk about India-US trade, India has been enjoying the surplus trade of around 28 billion US dollars. So because of this reason, India-US engagement is very crucial for India. So however, when we talk about the defense ties between two countries, we can say that defense ties are crucial. Okay, so they are fundamental and foundational in India-US comprehensive strategic partnership. Now, so USA has designated India as a major defense partner. So what does it mean that when US designated India as a major defense partner? So this exactly mean that USA will share critical technologies with major defense partners. Critical technologies, information sharing, and that is very important for upgrading and strengthening India's defense capabilities. So now see, if you look at India's total defense imports, around 45 percentage of India's total imports from Russia alone. So generally, it is not advisable that you rely heavily on one particular country. So therefore, India has also been started diversifying its arms supplies. Okay, so it's the arms imports. So therefore, major defense partner designation of India by the US will help India to strengthen its defense capabilities. So after that, so both India and US have also signed four key agreements. So these four key agreements are very important for technology transfer and information intelligence sharing with India. So firstly, the first agreement is called as Lemova Agreement that was signed in 2016. So this is Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Understanding or Association. Okay, so this is the first agreement. The second agreement is COMCASA. So this was signed in the year 2018. So Communications Compatibility and Security Agreement. So after that, the Industrial Security Agreement was also signed, and after that, the Basic Exchange and Memorandum of Cooperation Agreement was also signed in the year 2020. Right. So now, if you look at the bilateral exercises between India and US, so they have been conducting Yuddha Abhyas, Vajrprahar, Malabar, Impact. So they are conducted between these two countries. See, we talked about changing world order. Changing world order. Now, US's hegemony is being challenged by countries like China and Russia. So this is being evident from the fact that Chinese aggression has been, you can see the Chinese aggression and assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific region. So therefore, in order to contain the Chinese aggressiveness and assertiveness, USA has been joining with the like-minded nations like Australia, India, Japan. So it has already formed Quad Security Dialogue. So after Quad Security Dialogue, there is also AUKUS grouping and Five Eyes Intelligence Network also. So that is being formed by USA. So especially in the changing world order. So these bilateral exercises also ensure free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region, and it ensures freedom of navigation, freedom of overflight over the Indian Indo-Pacific region. So if you look at the major pillar of Indo-US relationship is that strong people-to-people connection. So if you look at the total diaspora population, it is around 4.9 million Indian diaspora living in US. So they form the second largest immigrant group in US after Mexicans. Okay. Now these are the broad areas of India-US strategic partnership. So these areas range from critical minerals, quantum technology, healthcare, education, space technology. Now when we talk about the space technology, we can talk about NISAR. Okay. So NASA ISRO satellite. Okay. So this is NISAR satellite. Both India and both ISRO and NASA have been collaborating on this. So after that, counter-terrorism is another major area of collaboration because for India, cross-border terrorism is a major challenge apart from insurgency, radicalization and fundamentalism. Now, USA has also been facing challenges with respect to terrorism right from 9/11 World Trade Center attack. So therefore, counter-terrorism is another major area of cooperation. So after that, the Indo-Pacific security. So they have announced their own Indo-Pacific policies. So the convergence of Indo-Pacific policy is also key to the strategic partnership between India and US. So after that, we should also discuss about the defense technology, the technology sharing, information exchange. So that is being evident from the, India designated as a major defense partner and four agreements that were being signed. So after that, cooperation in telecommunications, civil nuclear cooperation. So this is the first country. USA has signed civil nuclear agreement. So this agreement is also known as 123 agreement. So this is the major step in recognizing India by the other countries that India is a peaceful nuclear armed state. and that ensures energy security for India. Now, after that, we should also discuss about the clean energy partnership between these countries and critical emerging technologies partnership and trade and economy. Okay, so whenever you are writing India-US engagement, these points must be in your answer. So you have to write these points in your answer. Now, after that, we should also see about India-China tensions. So there has been increasing India-US tensions. For example, at the line of actual control, and even China encircling India through its sting of pearls policy and its increasing presence in the Indian Ocean, naval presence in the Indian Ocean. So this has also resulted in India tilting towards US. India tilted towards US and engaging with US in several areas. Okay, so as we have already discussed, in the changing world order, China has been challenging US and its hegemony influence in the region. So therefore, in this particular context, it is very critical for India to ensure its own security and also cooperating with the like-minded nations. Okay, so this cooperation will strengthen India's defense capabilities, but this should be subjected to India's policy of strategic autonomy. Okay, so if we talk about this in perspective, India is already part of the quadrilateral security dialogue. Okay, so the quadrilateral security dialogue will cooperate with all other countries in the Indo-Pacific region. So it ensures security, and it will also collaborate with other countries for the scientific development, infrastructure development, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief in the Indo-Pacific region. However, India's stance is that Quad is not a security alliance and Indo-Pacific is also not a club of limited nations. Okay, so it is a democratic in nature. So therefore, this is what India-US relationship in the changing world order. So you can write about this that in the conclusion you can mention that India should not be part of any sort of security alliances. So that could be detrimental to India's interests. So India could engage with the like-minded nations in the Indo-Pacific region, in the Indo-Pacific region. So that could serve India's interests better. So, however, overall, India's policy is guided by its own national interest, and India should follow the policy of strategic autonomy. So, this is how you can conclude this answer. Okay. So, that's all for today, and tomorrow also we will come up with some of the important topics for the discussion. So, please like the video and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.